Good evening, Varsha. Is it visible now? Good evening, Priyanka. Is the audio video okay? There was some issue with the video today. I don't know why. Is it okay right now? Please tell me in the chat if it is okay. Like we will start the session. Is it okay, Varsha? Is it okay, Priyanka? Okay. So we will start with today's session. Actually, there was some technical issue. The video was not appearing, so therefore we had a bit of delay. We are into day 4 of this daily answer wars and daily answer wars prime. So today we will be talking about a question given in the morning that was from GS2 paper of UPSC 2022 only, and it was a decent enough question of 15 marker, and I think most of you have written it nicely. I have checked all the copies in the Telegram group, not all the copies but most of the copies, and I think some pretty good answers are there. Also, the peer reviews that you are doing are pretty good. So in this session, we will try to dissect that question that was given, and then we will try to look at some of the copies and analyze what all problems were there in the answer, or what we could have done extra or done something better to improve our marks in this particular question. So coming to the question, it was about right of children to free and compulsory education act. So basically, it is called RTE Act in common parlance, but the whole name of the act is Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act. It was passed in 2009. So the question is talking that this act remains inadequate in promoting an incentive-based system for children's education without generating awareness about the importance of schooling. And we needed to analyze it. So the question statement was a bit like word heavy, or you can say literature heavy, but I don't think it was very tough. So basically, you have to analyze the RTE Act or this Act only. What has been its successes? What has it been its failure? And if you could have written those things, those main broadly, I think you should have got decent enough marks. So first, let us dissect the question, like what all was needed to be written and what the question actually meant. So the question says that this act remains inadequate in promoting an incentive-based system for children's education. So basically, the act does tries to promote an incentive-based system. So how does it promote an incentive-based system? You know that incentive is something like we reward to someone when uh, that person basically achieves that target. Then incentive is given. For example, in recent times, you see government has launched that production-linked incentive scheme. So when production is done to a certain level, incentives are given. So basically, that is the concept here. Inadequate in promoting an incentive-based system. So for children, this some incentives were given via this act. For example, before this act also, like midday meal scheme was there. So that is a type of an incentive. Like you will get the lunch in the school itself, and this act just continued those incentives. But the problem is that still schooling or the quality of education given in our schools have not been sufficient. So just promoting an incentive based system without generating awareness, now the children are not aware about the importance of schooling. Even the teachers are not properly aware, or there are multiple issues that only we had to analyze in this question. So these issues, like if you don't generate awareness about the importance of schooling, basically they are saying that this incentive based system will fail, or basically will remain inadequate. So we had to analyze along those lines only, like why RTE remains inadequate in generating that awareness about importance of schooling. So some of the drawbacks, like some of the implementation issues with RTE, needed to be mentioned. But before that, some positive points about RTE or what it tries to do also, you needed to mention that. So let us see, again we will go in that same framework, like introduction, body and conclusion. So in introduction, like we try to put some data points, and here it is sufficient enough to talk about like insertion of Article 21A that makes right to education a fundamental right. So I have just started by talking about this 86th constitutional amendment to the Indian Constitution made the right to education a fundamental right by insertion of Article 21A. So this was the 86th Constitutional Amendment Act, and after that, in 2019, 2009, again this act was passed which made this fundamental right more enforceable, like it operationalized it. Because even after the fundamental right, it was seen that without legalizing it or making it a rule, a law, people were not adhering to it, or still it was just in the rule, in the constitution, but it was not implemented at the ground level. So in order to operationalize it, this right of children to free and compulsory education act was passed. And it also contained some other provisions also to improve the education, primary education sector in India, and to give free education to children aged 6 to 14 years. The basic aim was that only to provide primary education to all children aged 6 to 14 years. So that only I've started writing. Started this question by writing in 2009. Right of children to free and compulsory education act was enacted to operationalize it with an aim to provide primary education to all children aged 6 to 14 years. So after that, you needed to talk about some of the features. Basically, uh, other than the features, you could have also mentioned some of the positives or some positive successes of this act if you wanted to. But I have tried to stick with the features because for it, like it enabled me to write some good points, and just the features of this act are pretty good. So I thought that I should mention some of the features of this act. If you talk about successes other than enrollment in schools, I don't think you will get multiple points. However, there are things like literacy rate or enrollment, girl child enrollment or overall enrollment. All of those things you can write, but I think this is also a better approach when you talk about this RTE Act, because the question also starts by talking about this act only. So some of the features are mentioned. Again, you need not mention all the features of this act. Most important three, four provisions will do. For example, you can talk about this 25% reservation for disadvantaged sections. Now, in this disadvantaged sections, SC, ST communities, OBC communities come. So you can talk about them. Next, it also makes provisions for a non-admitted child to be admitted to an age-appropriate class. For example, if someone is 8 or 10 years old and he is not admitted to any school or any class, then he can be admitted to that age appropriate class. So it provides that leverage in this act. Next, it sets some rules and standards related to pupil teacher ratio. That is, how many pupils will be per teacher in a school, buildings and infrastructure, school working days, and teacher working hours. Regarding all of these, it sets some rules and standards which are given in details in the act. Next is it also provides for prohibition of deployment of teachers for non-educational work. We usually see that teachers are usually posted in the times of election or something on election duty or other such duties whenever need arises. So this act basically prohibits that. That hampers the education of the children. Schools have to be closed because the teacher himself or herself goes for some other duty. So this act basically prohibits that. And next, it also provides for the appointment of teachers with requisite entry and academic qualifications, so that quality of teachers can also be maintained. So these are some of the most important provisions of this act. Other than this, some other provisions are also there, but if you are able to write three four important ones, I think that is enough. Next, what are the issues with that you needed to analyze, but before that you could just mention a linking statement that although the act has improved enrollment, here you can talk about literacy also in many places or overall in the country. The quality of education is still a concern, as highlighted by various reports such as ACER. Now, ACER, as you know, talks about foundational literacy and many other such issues. Like also talks about enrollment of children. It talks about reading ability, like foundational literacy ability, for example, reading, language, and arithmetic. All of those things it talks about, like what is the standard of those foundational skills of a child in India. So you can just mention some data points also here that according to ACER, the foundational literacy so and so, or the a student of class 5 cannot read basic text of class 2 or 3, something like that. And then go on to talk about inadequacy of right to education. Basically, I am jumping from positives to negatives, like from features to what are the deficiencies of that. So I thought that I should put a linking statement here. So next, when we talk about inadequacy, like there are multiple issues that are seen, and that is why like still quality of education is a concern in India. And most of those issues are related to implementation. Although the act mandates multiple things, like it gives uh, rules and guidelines regarding to what should be the pupil teacher ratio, how should a teacher be employed, but mostly it is seen that implementation is pretty slack. Like in most states, implementation is not done according to the standards, and that is a major issue. So you could have talked about the implementation of this act. So first and foremost, I have talked about people to teacher ratio. I think pupil to teacher ratio it should be. According to Ministry of Education, in primary schools, the pupil teacher ratio, which was at 43 in 2010-11, has come down to 26.3. So this is a very big drop, and I think this is a major cause of worry, because I think more number of uh, people were like now there are more number of people who are getting educated by the same amount of teachers. So this is always detrimental to the quality of education. So you can talk about this. Next, you can also talk about empty seats. Now this act basically provides for free education of children aged 6 to 14, but it is seen that even if seats are fixed for getting students admitted through this RTE act, only one third of such seats are filled, and most of these seats are empty. Even private schools and like even government schools, most seats are empty, and they charge the students rather than giving them free education. So that you can talk about. Next, it is about prevalence of dummy schooling. So dummy schoolings where attendance is not required is also prevalent in India. Like in many schools, we just see that children go to the school just to attend the midday meals or like eat their meals and then come back, and still they pass on the exams and get promoted also. So that is a very bad thing which is still continuing, which is a practice like without education, the education is shown to be done. So you can talk about dummy schooling. Next, you can mention about this midday meal issue. Again, this midday meal at schools is often unhygienic and disincentivizes students from attending classes. So although midday meal is provided in many places, we see in news that uh, about midday meal comes like quality of midday meals is very bad, like even protein rich diet and all of that is not done. So most students try to avoid that. It is not done in every place, like in every state it is not the issue, but in many states, especially the northern Indian states, midday meal is also an issue, and this basically, instead of incentivizing the student, disincentivizes them from attending classes or going to school. So these are basically the implementational issues that you could have written. Next, you can talk about some of the generic points, that is lack of basic infrastructure. For example, nowadays we need internet in schools, we need toilets, separate toilets for girls, we need common libraries, we need ramps, and all of that are absent. Like you won't see such facilities in most of the schools. So that is an issue, lack of basic infrastructure. Next, we can talk about engagement of teachers in non-academic roles. Like the act strictly prohibits teachers from multiple duties, but still teachers are engaged in non-academic roles like in other duties due to resource crunch, which is impacting the education and schooling quality. Also, there is a lack of training of the teachers, like most of the teachers lack in training and just uh, follow the pedagogy that they are comfortable with rather than what they should do. So the teachers lack training and many times fail to deliver quality content in the classroom, which makes learning monotonous, thus discouraging their attendance. Next, we can talk about corrupt administration. For example, this is a very generic problem. You can write this in almost every issue in India. So corruption is present in schools also. Inefficient administration makes it easy to cheat and pass. Therefore, students do not feel the need to study properly. Like you saw the example of a girl who had passed some exam and in that particular subject, and she did not even know the name of the subject. That was pretty viral. Something I think about political science or something. So you can talk about that like just by giving money, people are getting go ahead or passing their exams, and that should not happen. So these are some of the important points about the issues or inadequacy of the RTE Act, which you could have mentioned. After that, we can just go to the way forward or what all changes we can do to make children more aware or like make more uh, sensitize them more in order to make them more eager to go to school, so that they are just not happy by incentives, they are themselves understanding the importance of going to schools, and that will obviously lead to increase in the quality of education in India. So some points regarding that needed to be written in this answer, because this was a 15 marker, we had enough scope. So you can talk about use of technology. So technology should be used appropriately to monitor the attendance of both the students and teachers. Then we can talk about learning friendly approach. Here also you can mention the use of technology. For example, uh, that time when we use rote learning or something like that has already passed. So we can use technology or some pictorial representation, infographics, to make learning more friendly, arise curiosity among students, so that they themselves feel excited to go to school. So you can write about that. Next is about implementation issues. Like most of the issues regarding implementation is related to administration of schools. So it should be made sure that the act is implemented strictly. Next is about training of teachers. For this, like recently, a scheme called Nistha was launched. So this was about holistic teacher training. It was launched by NCRT. So you can mention that scheme. That will be a good value addition in this answer. So you can talk about that. Next is about some generic points about raising awareness and mentorship. So alumni of a school or the community and the society can be involved to provide mentorship to the students, and also some awareness uh, can be region from the bottom, like bottom approach can be taken to make aware the students regarding the value of education through schooling, and that will help them, I think, to go to school. And also to the parents, like there are multiple parents who are also not aware about importance of schooling, and they just think that it is okay if his or her child is passing, and they just make their child ready for jobs and all. But I think those parents should also be made aware, and that can be done at the societal level or by using a bottom up approach. So you can mention these things in the way forward. After that, we just needed to conclude this answer. Basically, in conclusion, I have tried to summarize what all I have written. So you can just see that the quality education is very important. Basically, I emphasize the importance of education. Quality education is one of the keys to embarking upon a path of true development in the society. Not just growth. Here, I mentioned the term development, which is a bit different from growth. Like development is about holistic development. So you can talk about this. In this regard, it is important that young students are made to understand the importance of schooling. So it is important that we make the children aware or make them understand that schooling is certainly important, along with incentivizing. Like only incentivizing them will not do, so we need to make them aware, make them talk to them about the quality of education also, so that all these efforts, like RTE efforts, we can reap the benefits of this act. So you can mention this conclusion, and after that, I think the answer should be complete, more or less. I think everything we have touched upon, like why uh, this act is inadequate, what are the features, what should be the way forward, and I think that was sufficient for this answer. What you could have done extra is like mentioned some more data points. I have missed writing some data here in this answer. For example, you could have talked here about ACER reports that would like substantiate your points regarding inadequacy of right to education. For example, if you talk about foundational literacy or like quality, that will emphasize basically your point that quality of education is not there or lacking in our schools. So you could have used those data points if you remembered, or if you just like uh, had those data points ready. So that was it for this answer. I think after this we will go to looking at some of the copies and what all you have written. If you have any like issues with this answer, you can ask me in the chat box and I will try to address them. Varsha, arithmetic and numeracy skills. Yeah, that is what I told you, Varsha. Like you can mention those data points if you wish to. Arji, good evening. Nisha, good evening. So that is it for this answer. I think next we will try to look at some of the copies. First is Pooja's copy. So the Right to Education Act 2009 provides free and compulsory education to children aged between 6 to 14 years under Article OK. Here, I think, Pooja, you can just write the full name of the act when you are writing for the first time. For example, here also the in the question also it is mentioned this act, right of children to free and compulsory education. So you can use that here. It is fine. Introduction is fine. After that, features of RTE Act. Let us see. Compulsory okay. Maintain proper norms and standards relating to people. Okay. Zero tolerance against discrimination and harassment. Special provisions for admission of children out of school. No child can be expelled. Okay. No, no, this, I think this point number 5 is incorrect. No child can be held back or expelled from school has been removed. I think there was an amendment in 2019, this very act, and there they, I think, removed this provision that because it was leading to like even if children were not passing their standards or were very weak in studies, they were being promoted. So that was not beneficial for the children themselves. So that was removed, I guess. All private schools to ensure 25%. So this is fine. Reservation is okay. Incentives to incentives provided to encourage parents are okay. Free of cost textbooks, fine. Midday meal scheme, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan providing differently able of children special needs. Okay, but I think you can avoid these things, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan and all of that, and try to finish it up within 6 7 points. 10 11 points are not required. Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan is a different scheme. Like it has multiple components again, so need not go there. Key issues for achieving RT lack of awareness. Key issues. Okay, so basically you are talking about challenges. So lack of awareness among child laborers, migrant children, differently abled children. Okay, lack of awareness over 25% reservation. Okay, lack of awareness of fundamental right with basic infrastructure like okay, the cut does not cover pre-primary education, that is children below age of 6 years. Okay, focus on rote learning and not on quality education. Okay, I think these last two three points are fine, Pooja. Like four, five, six are good, but I think the first two three points what you have done is just use that act only and mention lack of awareness because you have already talked about 25% reservation, you have talked about special provisions for marginalized children, you have talked about fundamental right in the earlier part, and then just you have added lack of awareness and form 3 points from that. So I think you can just avoid that and write some original points regarding to the implementation of Right to Education Act. Basically, there are multiple issues in the implementation of this act which can be talked about. For example, I can say that these things you can mention here, like about ratio. You can give some data about people to teacher ratio. You can talk about dummy schooling. You can talk about issue with midday meal. So these are some important good points that you could have mentioned rather than talking about this. Overall, if you wanted to talk about lack of awareness, I think 1 point was sufficient. You could have just mentioned that lack of awareness about the act, and that is sufficient, I guess. After that, you have moved to way forward. You could have also talked about the foundational issues. Talked about ASA report from NGO Pratham or a report by UNESCO. They also had released a report, I guess, in 2021 about state of school education in India. So if you could have picked some data out from there, you could have mentioned it in this part. Next is way forward campaign the representative of local bodies in Sarpanch. Okay, generating awareness using radio, social media, fine. Recruitment of better quality teachers, including the Anganwadis under the ambit of RTE Act, fine. Thus, the RTE Act is a great step towards achieving universal education in India, but due to limited awareness, deserving children are missing out of school. Using digital media for generating awareness will help in winning. The conclusion is fine, but I think way forward again, some more steps could have been mentioned, especially related to teachers and all. For example, you could have used schemes like Nistha to do some value addition to your answer. Using such schemes will just give you some extra marks. Otherwise, I think concept wise, this question was pretty easy. You just had to analyze stage of education in India, and I think every one of us knows about that. So most of us will write these points. So the key was to like use those initiatives, use some data, use those knowledge of those reports and all to make your answer more presentable. So that was important for this answer. Otherwise, I think basic concepts of this answer was pretty easy. So overall, I think you will get 5 out of 15 for this answer, Pooja. I think first part can be shortened a bit, and both the body and the way forward, that is inadequacy and the way forward, both those parts can be written a bit better. Like some more points could have been added. So next we move to Varsa's copy. According to the ISA report of 2022, student enrollment increased compared to pre-pandemic levels, but learning gap widened in foundational skills in reading and arithmetic. This is fine. Right of children to free and compulsory education act ensures free elementary education to every children. Okay, fine. Features of the act is fine. Free and compulsory education. Okay, you can avoid writing free and compulsory education again because already you have mentioned. I think here you can just mention that the act's main aim is this free and compulsory education, which I think you have meant here. After that, you can just talk about more features of this act. For example, reservations and all. No detention policy. Again, I think check it once, Varsa, but I think this has been via an amendment in 2019 has been removed. So you can just make sure whether it is there or not. Proof of age of admission is fine. The age of child for the professor shall be considered okay. Certificate teacher student ratio is fine. Provision of quality education, infrastructure, allocation of funds should be okay. Infrastructure, school infrastructure need to be improved in every 3 years. Okay, so some of the most important provisions of this act are about teachers. Like for example, they are prohibited from doing extra other duties rather than teaching, and it provides for better training to teachers and better enrolling quality teachers in the schools. So you can talk about that a bit. Otherwise, I think rest of the points are good. Some other things, for example, you can talk about midday meal scheme if you want to, but I think still it is enough. First 2 points I think can be avoided. Uh, this part. Next, we move to, however, the act remain inadequate because meager allocation on education. The demand for allocating 6% of GDP still remains okay. passivity among parents with respect to public education. But I think here you need to talk about what are the inadequacies with this act. You don't need to get broad and talk about education sector in India. For example, meager allocation on education is an issue with education sector. When you are analyzing like what are the problems with primary education, you can mention these points, and I think will be one of the topmost points in that answer. But here we are talking about specifically the Right to Education Act. So we need to analyze what are the issues with this act itself. So rather than talking about allocation, you can mention the problems in the implementation of this act. That will be a bit better if you address it in that way. Among parents with respect to public education, private schools are seen as status symbol. Okay, the safeguard in patriarchal society concept of common school system was neglected. Extension of the age groups of three are almost okay. So this point is good. Comprehensive and continuous evaluation is not done in letter and spirit. Lack of awareness among child laborers. Okay, fine. The pupil to teacher issue. So again, these two three points are good in the end. But I think other than that, the top points are basically about education sector in India mostly, rather than talking about the Right to Education Act in particular. So be a bit particular. I think you can talk more about Right to Education Act in this part of your answer. Pick some points from the discussion that we had done. I'll forward that to you so that you can improve upon your content a bit. Way forward, focusing on quality of education is fine. Provision of elementary education in mother tongue, adopting the productive midday meal scheme to sustain more children. Okay, promoting government schemes. Okay, fine. So this is fine. In way forward, you can just be a bit innovative because way forward is basically not asked. When you are talking about inadequacy of RTE, no, that is like the major demand of this question. The question is asking just that part in detail. So here you need to stick to what the question is asking. You can take a bit of liberty in way forward and go on talking about education sector other than improving the RTE Act. So that is fine. But when you are addressing that part, I think there you should stick to talking about RTE Act. Protection of child rights, bringing minority, okay. Protection of child rights, right of children to free and compulsory education act has in fact made a profound impact in promoting access to education for children in India. It remains inadequate in promoting an incentive-based system for children education without generating awareness about importance of schooling. Okay, fine, but I think you could have broken this statement into parts. For example, it becomes a very long conclusion, and basically, it seems that you have just picked up the question line and repeated it. So you can talk about that just on the basis of incentives. Our schooling system will not become top notch. We also need to promote awareness or nudge or sensitize the students about the importance of schooling, about the quality of schooling, and about education itself, so that they can continue to go to school and also improve upon their skills and quality of education. So better so along these lines you could have written it. Otherwise, it is fine. I think most of the like structure of your answer is pretty good, Varsha. I think this was what was required. But as I said, some of the points could have been better, especially in all those parts. In the first part, I think first 2 points are a bit off, and in the next part, I think you could have stuck to RT Act particularly to make it better. So overall, I think you will also get 5 out of 15 for this answer. Some better content surely would have resulted in some more marks. Next, we move to Harji's copy. Right to Education Act provided free and compulsory education. Okay. Right to Education Act. Here you can again, I'll say that when you are writing for the first time, just try to mention the whole act. After that, you can go on writing RT Act. That is not an issue. Aims to provide primary education to all children age 6 to okay. It mandates 25% reservation. No admitted child to admitted. Uh, no. Okay. Here, I think it is not clear. Like those child who have not been admitted should be admitted to an age of appropriate class. So that is it. It focuses on making system child friendly and child centered learning. So this is good. I think most important provisions are written. Achievements of RT Act, increased enrollment, infrastructure building, disadvantaged sections, made education inclusive, ensuring all round development of children. Okay, RT Act. So I think you have taken your 1.5 pages in talking about the politics only. So now let us see what you are writing in next. But however, the RT Act remains inadequate. Lack of awareness is fine. Migrant children lack of awareness. Again, same points are being repeated. Apathy towards public education system. This is okay. Private educational system is considered better than public institutions, but now this view is changing at least in New Delhi. Common school system got neglected. Kothari Commission recommended the concept of neighborhood schools based on the common school system, but RTI did not include the concept of neighborhood Full extension of age act needs to include 3 to 6 year age group, and four, okay, lack of financial location, there's a need to budget for the RTE act. So yeah, you can write along these lines. Pooja, not Varsha, you can see that along these lines you can write it. You can say that the budget for RTE Act itself is a bit less and that can be increased. Don't talk about whole of education sector because that will be more broad. That you can use in way forward or concluding your answer if you try to link it in some way. So that more incentives can be provided to children also. Okay, fine. Still there's the issue of toilets. Okay, fine. Low learning outcomes. We need to improve the teacher-student ratio, proper implementation of comprehensive continuous evaluation way forward. Very good answer, I think, Harji. You have most of the points are mentioned, but थोड़ा वैल्यू एडिशन कर सकते हैं. You can make write some data points in order to enrich your answer, and especially in this part, like when you are talking about the issues with the quality of education in India. For example, when you are talking about uh, common school system or extension of age, these are fine points, but here you can talk about like foundational literacy issues or the quality of education needs to emphasize a bit, because RT is incentivizing education sector, but it is not like creating much awareness, so that you can focus on those parts a bit. Otherwise, I think it is fine. Low learning outcome here, for example, here you can talk about those issues. When you talk about teachers, you can talk about lack of training and all, and then you can link it with Nistha scheme. So those things you can do. Way forward, government should generate more awareness for education of children, make teaching profession more attractive, teacher training. For example, here you can write Nistha more emphasize on quality education over quantity of education. RT. No, I think this point can be avoided because both are important. I think enrollment in schools is also important along with quality. So better than that, you can frame it better. Basically, RT is successful up to a certain extent, increase in the enrollment rate, but now there is a need to, okay, fine. Conclusion is pretty good. So overall, you have written a very content-rich answer. Like all the parts have been written pretty well and like addressed pretty well, and many points are written in each part. Uh, just try to include some government schemes, some data points, report names, etc., to make it a bit better. Otherwise, I think you will get 6 out of 15 for this answer, Harji. So that will be it for today, guys. Today, I think due to some technical issues, we could not take one more copy. Otherwise, I would have tried to do so. Again, we will meet tomorrow with a new question, and we will have the discussion session in the evening, evaluation and feedback session in the evening. If you have any doubts, you can ask me here also and in the Telegram group also, and try to participate in the night owl discussions when we'll have that around 10 11 p.m. And thank you very much. Consider joining Daily Wars Prime, Answer Wars Prime, if you want to update your answer writing skills at a personal level. Otherwise, I think this initiative is good enough and it will continue for the time being. So thank you very much, guys. Again, we will meet tomorrow.